It was snowing hard, but he wasn't wearing a coat. Mark Roberts stood in the middle of the church parking lot with a paper bag of books under one arm and a scarf trailing forgotten from his pocket. Around him, guests were long gone. The parking lot was a graveyard of tire tracks and flower petals slowly dissolving into slush. He had come to deliver hymnals, nothing more. Just another errand for the pastor before dinner with Ben. But something stopped him, someone actually. At the far end of the church steps, near the old wooden bench that faced the white hills beyond, sat a woman in a wedding dress, alone. Her back was to him. The dress spilled around her like a broken promise, no jacket, no bouquet, just fabric too thin for December and hair too styled for where she was. Mark hesitated. Maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe she was just cold and needed a moment. But then he heard it. A whisper, so soft it might have been the wind. "Nobody wants my baby." He froze, the kind of sentence that rearranges the air around it. That makes even the most detached part of you ache in places you thought were sealed shut. He looked down at the bag in his hand. He could walk inside, pretend he hadn't heard, let it be someone else's heartbreak. But his feet didn't move, neither did she. Slowly, cautiously, Mark crossed the distance between them. The snow made his footsteps sound like paper tearing. As he neared, he saw more details. Her gloves were fingerless. Her shoes weren't shoes, just satin flats soaked through. The edge of her dress had gone gray with dirty snow. Her hands trembled in her lap, clutching something. A folded napkin. No, a notebook. "Ma'am," he said gently, voice quiet enough not to startle. "Are you okay?" She didn't look up. Silence. Then after a long moment she answered not to him, but to the sky ahead of her. "No, but it doesn't matter anymore." Mark took that in, not the words, but the weight under them. "I'm not trying to fix anything," he said, setting the paper bag gently on the bench a few feet away. "But would you like some company?" Another pause, the kind that holds breath and memory and maybe, just maybe, permission. She didn't answer, but she didn't say no either. So he sat, not close, not presumptuous, just near enough that she would know. Someone had stayed. For a while neither of them spoke. The snow fell steady. The trees made no sound. Somewhere in the distance a church bell rang, not for celebration, but for time passing. "I was supposed to be married at 2, she said finally. Mark nodded slowly. "What happened?" She let out a breath. It came out like smoke. "He texted me at 1:40, said he wasn't coming. Said he couldn't do this." Her hand moved to her belly, subtle but unmistakable. "And then the music stopped, and the people left, and I sat here because I didn't know where else to go." Mark didn't fill the silence. He let it sit. Then slowly he looked down at her notebook. "Can I ask what that is?" She glanced at it as if remembering it for the first time. "It's names," she said. "Names I thought he and I would choose together." He nodded. His voice came softer now. "I have a son, 8 years old. His name's Ben." That was it. No hero story, no advice. Just a fact, offered like a hand. For the first time she turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were rimmed red but dry. "You stayed," she said. He nodded. "Sometimes that's all we can do." He reached out slowly, no pressure, and offered his hand. She stared at it. Then she took it. Not tightly, not forever, just enough to hold on to something real for one more breath. And in that quiet, with snow gathering at their feet and no vows spoken, something new began. Not a romance, not a rescue, just a beginning. The school bell rang 5 minutes late that morning. It always did on Tuesdays. Mark Roberts didn't mind. It gave him time to finish his coffee in the driver's seat of his old Subaru, radio off. watching the kids pour into the building in a chaotic wave of backpacks, lunchboxes, and half-tied shoes. Next to him in the passenger seat, Ben was still chewing the last bite of toast. 8 years old, hair uncombed in the back, shoelaces mismatched. Mark reached over and smoothed a crumb from his son's cheek. "You got your book report?" Ben nodded. "In my folder. Also, I put in the bookmark you gave me." Mark smiled. "Which one?" "The one with the mountain. It's kinda bent now, though." "That's the best kind," Mark said. "Means it's been used." Ben gave a thumbs up like that meant something profound. Then he hopped out and ran toward the front steps of the elementary school, waving once without looking back. Mark watched until the doors swallowed his son. Then he sighed, turned the ignition, and drove the 3 blocks back to his shop. The front door of the bookstore stuck slightly in winter, the wood swollen from cold. He nudged it open with a shoulder, stepped into the silence, and flipped the sign to open. It wasn't a big place, barely more than 2 rooms and a back closet that smelled like cinnamon and printer toner, but it was his. 3 Pines books. No slogan, no neon. Just hand-lettered shelves and a coffee pot that brewed more for comfort than caffeine. Mark hung his coat, turned on the lights, and began the ritual. Check the cash box, restock the used mystery paperbacks, flip through last night's online orders. Outside, snow curled against the window, whispering against the glass. He didn't mind the quiet. It had become a kind of friend. After the divorce, noise had felt unbearable, TVs, crowds, even music. It all reminded him of what he'd lost, laughter in the kitchen, 2 toothbrushes in the cup, the hum of another presence moving through the house. Now silence was a blanket. It made space for breathing. A customer wandered in around 9:30 looking for old cookbooks. Mark offered her coffee and helped her find a 1970s Southern Comfort spiral-bound gem, yellowing at the edges. She left smiling. At 11, a delivery truck pulled up. Mark signed for the boxes, shelved new releases without fanfare, made a mental note to dust the biography section. At noon, he reheated leftover pasta behind the counter, ate while flipping through a dog-eared copy of a parenting guide he never finished. On the counter beside the register sat a small tray of bookmarks, some made by Ben from construction paper, others from thrifted postcards or scraps of fabric. He ran his thumb over the edge of the one with the mountain. The corners were soft, the ink fading. He never planned to run a bookstore. It had belonged to his aunt. When she passed, he'd inherited the lease and the keys, mostly out of guilt, but over time the place had become more than an inheritance. It was a way to keep going. Books didn't need explanations. They didn't ask where your spouse had gone or why your kids sometimes cried during recess. They just waited patient, full of stories that were not your own. At 2:15, he checked the time. School pickup was at 3. He scribbled a note for walk-ins. Back by 3:30, take a bookmark if you need one. And locked the door. He was halfway down the block when he thought about her again. The woman in the wedding dress, she hadn't given him her name. She hadn't taken the coffee he offered, but she'd taken his hand, just for a moment. And he couldn't stop thinking about that sentence, the one that wasn't for him but somehow still landed in his chest. Nobody wants my baby. He reached into his pocket and found the mountain bookmark. He wasn't sure why he'd taken it with him today. Maybe because some things like paper, like people, are stronger when bent. The bell above the door jingled softly, a sound that usually meant little but today made Mark look up a second longer. She stepped inside quietly, brushing melted snow from her sleeves. Still in boots too formal for the weather and a coat clearly not hers. Too big at the shoulders, sleeves folded twice, Mark recognized her before she said anything. "Hi," she said, voice low, tentative. "I'm sorry to come in like this. He closed the shipping binder in front of him. "You're welcome here." She nodded, didn't move closer. "I was just walking, and I saw the lights, and I remembered your voice from yesterday." Mark offered a small smile. I still haven't figured out if I said the right thing. You didn't, she replied, then paused. But you didn't say the wrong thing either. That's rare. He gestured to the stool across from the register. She hesitated, then stepped forward slowly, like someone approaching something breakable. I'm Mark, he said. I know. Pastor Ellis said you ran the bookstore. I'm Anna. Do you want some tea? He asked. It's just cheap peppermint bags, but it's hot. She hesitated. Okay. Mark disappeared into the back room, leaving Anna standing in the quiet of the shop. She glanced around, dust motes dancing in the light from the bay window. Rows of books arranged with care but not perfection. A stack of paper bookmarks in a tray labeled free. Take one. She picked one up. A postcard of a train going into a mountain tunnel. On the back, a child's handwriting in blue marker read, "Don't stop here. Keep going." When Mark returned with 2 chipped mugs, she was still holding it. Your son? He nodded, handing her the tea. Ben. He made a bunch of those during lockdown. She turned it over again, then tucked it into her coat pocket without asking. They sat in the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Then she spoke softly, as if unsure she was allowed to. I never planned to be pregnant, but once I was, it felt like everything else should just fall into place, like if I loved the baby enough, it would be enough. Mark didn't reply right away. Then, you don't need to explain. I know, I just feel like I have to someone. She sipped the tea. It was too hot, but she didn't complain. I haven't told many people, she said. Most of them assume I did something wrong, that I scared him off. Mark's gaze stayed steady, gentle. I know that feeling, he said. Anna looked up. My wife left when Ben was 3, he said. No big fight, no scandal, just said she couldn't do this anymore. The early mornings, the responsibility, the weight. Anna blinked. She said it felt like drowning, he added. What did you do? He set down his mug. I let her go, and then I stayed, because someone had to. For a moment her face softened, not out of pity but recognition. She knew that sentence. She looked down at her belly, then back at Mark. I didn't come here to cry, she said, but I might. That's okay, he said, voice low. You don't owe this place strength. They sat in silence again. This time it felt different, less lonely. I'm not staying in town, Anna said after a moment. I was supposed to leave tomorrow. We were going to move south, start fresh. Mark nodded. Plans change. Yeah. She stood, hands wrapped around the tea mug. Thank you. For the tea. For yesterday. He nodded again. You need anything else, just come by. We're open most days except when we're not. Ben makes the schedule. Anna managed a smile at that. She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. That thing your son wrote, she said, about not stopping. Yeah, it's a good reminder. Mark looked at her, truly looked this time. Not as a stranger, not as a crisis, but as someone still deciding which way to turn. He nodded once quietly. Keep going. And with that, she stepped into the snow. The door creaked as it opened, just wide enough for her to slip through without making a sound. Anna stepped into the apartment she hadn't planned to return to. Not like this. The air inside was still. Too still. Like the place was holding its breath along with her. She closed the door behind her, not bothering to lock it. The hallway light flickered once overhead, then gave up. She stood in the shadow for a moment, coat still on, snow melting quietly into the mat. From the corner, the garment bag still hung on the closet door white, unzipped halfway, the lace of the wedding dress peeking out like something ashamed to be seen. Anna turned away. The kitchen was half-packed. A few plates in a cardboard box labeled in Sharpie, fragile, take to new place. On the counter sat a bottle of sparkling cider they were supposed to open that night, still sealed. She brushed a hand over the countertop. Her fingers left tracks in the thin film of dust. In the living room, gift boxes stacked against the wall like a shipment waiting to be claimed. She hadn't returned any of them, hadn't even opened some. One sat open, half unwrapped, a baby blanket in pale yellow, soft as cloud, hand-knitted, no note. Anna sank onto the couch and pulled the blanket into her lap. Her hand moved almost unconsciously to her stomach. The baby shifted just a flutter, just enough to remind her she wasn't entirely alone. She spoke aloud, but barely above a whisper. "We were supposed to start new. Just you and me and a future." Her voice cracked on the last word, not from grief exactly, but from the way silence seems to echo when it's personal. Across the room, a box of framed photos sat open. She reached in, pulling one out her. And Daniel, standing in front of a lighthouse last summer. He had one arm around her, the other shielding his eyes from the sun. She looked happy, tired maybe, but happy. She stared at it, then without ceremony laid it face down on the coffee table. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she got up and walked back into the hallway, stopping in front of the wedding dress. Her hand hovered over the fabric. It still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachet the boutique had tucked into the bag. She remembered the woman who helped her pick it out, saying, "This one's for beginnings." Anna had believed her. She drew the dress out of the bag fully now, letting it fall into her arms. The satin was cold, the lace delicate. She stared at the fabric, the way it folded and clung and shimmered under cheap ceiling light. It was beautiful, and it didn't belong to her anymore. She carried it carefully to the bedroom and laid it on the bed. Then she sat beside it and did nothing for a while. Time passed. She couldn't say how much. Outside, the snow continued falling. The world softened under its weight. Inside, Anna opened the drawer of her nightstand, pulled out the notebook, the one filled with baby names, pages of them, each written in her careful handwriting with tiny notes beside them. Names she had whispered in the middle of the night, imagining a future that had slipped through her hands like warm water. She flipped to the last page. It was blank. And for the first time since the church steps, Anna felt something stir in her chest, not hope, exactly, but a refusal to let it all rot inside her. She picked up a pen, her hand hovered over the page. Then slowly, deliberately, she wrote 3 words in the middle of the paper. "We're still here." She underlined it once, then closed the notebook and placed it beside the dress. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know where she'd go when the lease ended, or how she'd explain everything to her mother, or what kind of job she could still do with a baby on the way and a resume full of broken plans. But for now, she had her breath and a sentence. And sometimes that was enough to keep moving. Saturday morning smelled like pine and cold metal. The Christmas tree lot sat on the corner of 2 sleepy streets tucked between a bakery and an auto repair shop. Rows of evergreens stood upright in wooden frames like a small forest waiting to be chosen. Each tree wore a colored tag. Each tag had a price and a promise. Mark held Ben's gloved hand with one hand. The other carried a thermos of coffee. Anna walked a few steps behind them, bundled in a borrowed coat, one hand resting absently on the curve of her stomach. She hadn't planned on coming, but when Mark knocked on her apartment door and said, "Ben insisted," it had been easier to say yes than to explain why she wanted to say no. Ben had made her a paper hat out of newspaper. It didn't fit. She wore it anyway. "So," Mark said, clearing his throat as they passed the first row of trees, "rules are simple. The tree has to fit in the bookstore window. Not block it, not scrape the ceiling. Bonus points if it smells like winter." Ben raised his hand like a soldier reporting for duty. "And it has to be branchy enough for heavy ornaments." Anna smiled slightly. "Branchy. Got it." They weaved between trees. Some were too short, some leaned to one side, some looked like they'd already given up. Ben darted ahead, shouting, "I found it!" About 3 separate trees, Anna stayed close to Mark without seeming to. Their shoulders didn't touch, but their footsteps found the same rhythm. He noticed her eyes scanning everything, people, exits, the sky. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm just not used to this," she said. "This? Normal things, tree lots, Saturday mornings, people being kind without asking for something in return." Mark nodded. "Yeah, that takes time." They reached a row near the back. One tree stood alone, a little crooked but tall and full. Ben pointed. "That one!" Anna tilted her head. "It leans a little." "So do I," Mark said, still standing. Ben turned to Anna. "Can we get it?" She looked at him, really looked. His eyes were so open, so sure. "Yeah," she said softly. "Let's get the leaning tree." Mark paid in cash. Ben high-fived the tree lot guy. Anna held the thermos while Mark tied the tree to the roof of the car, hands red from cold. Once everything was secure, they climbed in. The heater groaned to life, puffing warm air onto the windshield. Ben sat in the back, unwrapping a candy cane from his coat pocket. Anna cradled her cup of coffee with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her palms. Mark started the car, then glanced at her. "You sure you're okay?" She didn't answer right away. "I didn't think I'd feel anything," she said. "Being out here, with people, with you. And I felt something." He waited. "It wasn't joy," she continued. "It wasn't even comfort, but it was possible." Mark gave a soft smile. "That's something." Outside, the world moved slowly, snow beginning to fall again. Lights blinking from shop windows, strangers bundled in scarves crossing the street with bags of bread and tinsel. Inside the car, something delicate was beginning to form. Not certainty, not love, but something like permission. Ben leaned forward between the seats. "Next Saturday, can we make gingerbread?" Anna turned toward him. "I don't know how." "I do," he said confidently. "You just need sugar, a bear-shaped cookie cutter, and patience. Dad says patience is the secret ingredient for everything." Mark coughed like he wasn't embarrassed. Anna laughed, truly this time, even if just for a second. The tree on the roof bumped lightly as the car turned the corner. A crooked tree, a borrowed coat, a Saturday that hadn't been planned, and in the smallest of ways a beginning that felt a little like home. The bookstore smelled like pine. The tree leaned slightly to the left in the front window. Dressed in mismatched ornaments, some old, some clearly made by Ben. A paper snowflake hung sideways near the top. It felt just right. Mark sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a box of tangled lights. Anna sat nearby, resting on a cushion, both hands on her belly, watching Ben rearrange the ornaments for the third time. Outside, the sky turned indigo. Inside, the heat hummed softly. It was the kind of evening that didn't need music. Anna broke the silence first. "Did you know what you were doing back then, when it was just you and Ben?" Mark didn't look up right away. He finished untangling a strand, then set it gently aside. "No." He picked up the next knot of wire. "Not even close." She waited. "The night she left," he said quietly. "Ben had a fever, not serious, just one of those toddler things. But I remember standing in the hallway with this panic, like the ground under me had been hollowed out." Anna watched his face, calm but focused like someone who had practiced remembering without drowning. "I held him that night for 7 hours straight. Didn't sleep. Just kept checking if he was still breathing. I Googled symptoms I couldn't spell. I sang lullabies I didn't know I knew." He paused. "The next morning I made eggs that he wouldn't eat. He cried for her. For days I told him she was on a trip. It wasn't a lie, not yet. Anna's voice came soft. Did you ever think she'd come back? He didn't answer at first, then I hoped every morning, until I didn't. He leaned back, resting against the bookshelf. The lights between his fingers blinked once, then stayed steady. People say kids are resilient, and they are. But nobody talks about the quiet parts, like when they won't go to sleep unless your hand is on their back, or when they ask if they did something wrong. Anna looked down. Her fingers moved lightly over her belly, slow and steady. He's okay now, Mark added. Ben's bright, kind. He gets frustrated when puzzles don't fit, but apologizes to worms when he steps on dirt. That made her smile. You must be proud. I am, he said, but I'm tired too. Not from raising him, from pretending it's easy. Anna looked up. You don't pretend that well, she said. Mark laughed, quiet and surprised. Good. She shifted slightly, adjusting the cushion beneath her. I'm scared, she admitted, of not being enough, of not knowing what to do. He met her eyes. You will, and when you don't, you'll figure it out anyway. How do you know? Because you showed up. That's half of it. He stood, stretched his legs, walked over to the window to plug in the lights. The tree lit up all at once, too bright at first, then gentle, familiar. Ben clapped from across the room. Anna looked at the reflection in the glass. A crooked tree, a boy on the floor, a man standing alone with tired shoulders. And herself. Somehow it didn't feel as lonely as it had. Mark turned around, brushing his hands on his jeans. You hungry? He asked. A little. There's leftover soup in the back, nothing fancy, but it's warm. Anna stood slowly, her body shifting with effort. Warm is good. And just like that, the evening continued. No big speeches, no big revelations, just soup and lights and the beginning of trust where fear used to live. The open sign hung slightly crooked in the bookstore window. Anna didn't fix it. She just smiled and walked in. It was the first time she'd come in without hesitation. Mark looked up from behind the counter, where he was wrestling a string of tinsel into submission. His hair was tousled, his flannel sleeves rolled. He looked up like he hadn't expected anyone, then softened when he saw it was her. I brought cookies, she said, holding up a paper bag. They're burnt on the bottom, but they smell okay. He grinned. Burnt is underrated. Ben popped out from between two shelves like a magician mid-trick. Are they the kind with chocolate inside? Only if you close your eyes and believe, Anna replied. Ben did exactly that, shut his eyes tight and held out both hands. She dropped a cookie into his palms like it was treasure. The shop wasn't busy. A few browsers had come through earlier, but now it was just the three of them. The little Christmas tree by the window leaned charmingly as ever, now with a scarf tied near the base Ben's addition. So the roots don't get cold. Mark gestured to a half-opened box on the floor. We've got lights, stars, some bells that don't work, and a weird plush reindeer missing one eye. Anna set her bag down and dropped to the floor beside it. Sounds like family. They spent the next hour moving through the space, slowly, deliberately. Anna taped paper snowflakes to the windows while Mark balanced on a ladder, hanging lights across the doorway. Ben tied bows onto book displays and kept offering creative suggestions like, let's put Santa hats on all the mystery novels. There was laughter. Not constant, not loud, but real. The kind that slips out between quiet moments like steam rising from a mug. At one point, Anna stood back and watched them. Mark lifting Ben onto his shoulders to hang a string of lights. The boy's giggles echoing through the wooden shelves. For a second, something inside her stung. Not jealousy, just unfamiliar warmth. Later, they took a break on the floor, backs against the bottom shelf in the poetry section. Mark passed out cups of cider lukewarm, slightly too sweet. Ben rested his head on Anna's shoulder without asking. She froze for a beat, then let him stay. "I never thought I'd spend this season in a bookstore," she said quietly. Mark took a sip of cider. "I never thought I'd run one." They both smiled, eyes forward. Ben mumbled something about being tired and crawled across the rug to curl up in a beanbag chair by the window. Within minutes, he was asleep, hand still holding a crumbled cookie. Anna lowered her voice. "He trusts so easily." Mark nodded. "Kids do, until someone teaches them not to." She looked at him. "You didn't teach him that." "I'm trying not to." Outside, the wind had picked up. Snow whipped sideways across the street lamps. But inside, the lights glowed soft and amber. The smell of pine and cinnamon hung in the air. Anna reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small ornament ceramic, shaped like a house with a red roof. "I bought this months ago," she said. "Thought it'd go on our first tree, but I couldn't bring myself to open the box." Mark looked at it, then at her. She walked over to the tree and hung it gently on the lowest branch. There was no speech, no significance announced, but something shifted, a bookmark in the middle of a chapter, a thread picked up where it had been dropped, a tiny red-roofed house finally home. The lights had been dimmed for the evening, but the bookstore stayed open just for them. Ben was upstairs in the loft corner, fast asleep with a book over his face and a blanket tucked under his chin. From below they could hear the quiet rise and fall of his breath, steady and safe. Mark poured 2 cups of tea, nothing special, just chamomile, and handed one to Anna. They sat by the window where the Christmas tree cast long, uneven shadows across the floor. For a while no one spoke. Then Anna said softly, "You're good at this." "At what?" "This quiet, letting people just be." Mark smiled faintly, taking a sip. "It took practice." She studied his face, not searching for something, just observing. He looked younger when he wasn't worrying, but even relaxed, there was something worn into his eyes, like a page turned one too many times. "You ever tell people what happened?" she asked. "Not often." She didn't push. He took a breath. "She was my college friend," he began, eyes on his cup. "Not a whirlwind romance. We were the kind of couple people called steady. No drama, no fireworks." Anna nodded, listening without interrupting. "When Ben came along, it felt like we were building something real, like we had graduated into the next stage of life and were doing it right." He shifted slightly, letting the words take their time. "But after a while, she started drifting. I didn't notice it at first. I thought it was just stress, motherhood, exhaustion." His voice dropped. "Then one night she didn't come home. Said she needed air. That air turned into a motel. And then a different city." Anna held her tea tighter. "She said she didn't want to be a mother. Not full-time. Not at 29. Said she didn't know who she was anymore and she couldn't find out with a child attached to her." Anna whispered, "That must have hurt." Mark looked at her, not with anger, but a deep, patient sadness. "It did, but not for the reason people think. I wasn't angry because she left me. I was angry because she made him feel like it was his fault." Anna blinked slowly. Her hand drifted instinctively toward her belly. "She still calls sometimes," he continued. "Birthdays, random Tuesdays, always brief, always cheerful. Like we're characters in a sitcom she used to watch." "And Ben?" "He stopped asking about her 2 years ago." Anna nodded, her gaze drifting out toward the window. Snow was falling again, thin, almost invisible but steady. She spoke next, voice smaller than before. "I always thought I'd be the one to stay, the one to hold things together." "You are," Mark said, "but I didn't mean to do it alone." "No one does." The heater clicked once. a small reminder that the world kept moving forward even when the past pressed hard on your shoulders. Mark leaned back in his chair, eyes still on her. You don't have to carry it all at once. I know, she said, but it feels like if I put it down, I won't be able to pick it back up again. He nodded. Then don't put it down. Just let someone else help carry it for a while. She looked at him, really looked, and something passed between them. Not romantic, not urgent, but deeply human. Trust. Mark stood and reached for a small fleece throw from behind the counter, walked over and gently draped it across her knees. Stay as long as you want, he said. We're not closing anytime soon. Anna exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel like she had to run. She looked around the bookstore, the soft lights, the crooked tree, the boy sleeping upstairs, and the man who had quietly handed her warmth without asking for anything back. And she thought, maybe beginnings don't have to look like beginnings. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of gray afternoon that couldn't decide whether it wanted to snow or rain. The bookstore was quiet, radio humming somewhere between two stations. Anna stood behind the front counter, flipping through a book on baby sleep rhythms that Mark had pulled from the parenting shelf for her. She was alone. Mark had taken Ben to a dentist appointment. The bell above the door rang. She didn't look up right away, just called out without thinking, "We're open, but just browsing, okay?" The voice that answered wasn't one she expected or wanted. "Anna?" She froze. That name, in that tone, it was muscle memory. It hit before the meaning did. Slowly, she looked up. Daniel stood just inside the door, soaked from the half-frozen rain, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His hair was shorter, eyes shadowed, the kind of tired you don't catch up from in one night. "Hi," he said, voice tentative. You look good." She stared at him. "I'm not doing this here. I know. I didn't come to cause a scene. I didn't even know where you were until your sister told me. I had to see you." He stepped closer. She took a small step back. "I shouldn't be here without asking. I get that. But when I heard you were still in town and that what?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "That you're still pregnant." A silence dropped between them, heavy and pulseless. She put the book down, carefully. Like if she moved too fast, the ground would shift again. "What do you want, Daniel?" He swallowed hard. "I messed up. You don't have to say it, I know. Leaving like I did, the day I did, it was the worst version of me." "Don't flatter yourself," she said flatly. "You didn't become someone else. You just showed me who you were." Daniel winced, then looked away for a beat. "I was scared," he said. "Not of the baby, of everything. The responsibility, the idea that if I got this wrong, I'd ruin 3 lives, not just mine." Anna didn't answer. "I thought leaving was the merciful choice," he continued. "I told myself I was giving you space, but the truth is I didn't believe in myself enough to stay." She crossed her arms over her chest, jaw clenched. "And now? Now, I don't know, but I want to. I want to try." A long breath escaped her lips, not dramatic, just exhausted. "You don't just show up and want to try, Daniel. This isn't a trial run. There's a heartbeat inside me that doesn't pause when you feel lost." He nodded, shame heavy on his shoulders. "I'm not asking for a miracle, or for you to forgive everything. But if there's a version of this where I get to help raise our child—" "You didn't even want her!" she snapped. Daniel blinked. "Her? Yes, her." He stood quiet for a long beat, then said softly, "I didn't know that. And now you do." She walked to the door, held it open with one hand. "I need time. I can wait. I didn't say you should." He hesitated, eyes searching hers, but there was nothing left to find there. Finally, Daniel stepped outside. The rain had picked up. He paused before turning to go. "She'll be lucky," he said, "if she ends up anything like you." Anna said nothing. She watched him disappear into the gray like he had once before. Only this time, she was the one holding the door. And this time she didn't close it gently. Mark didn't mean to see it. He and Ben were coming back from the dentist, walking along the sidewalk. Ben mid-story about a goldfish in the waiting room when Mark glanced toward the bookstore window and stopped. A man stood just inside the door, shoulders slouched, a duffel bag at his feet. Anna stood across from him, posture rigid, not afraid, not exactly angry either, just braced. Mark slowed, hand tightening instinctively on Ben's shoulder. Ben followed his gaze. "Who's that with Anna?" "I don't know," Mark said, voice calm, but he had a guess. He guided Ben gently toward the bakery next door. "Let's grab a muffin. I'll meet you inside, okay?" Ben didn't question it. He darted through the door and disappeared behind the glass case. Mark stayed outside. From the narrow alley beside the store, he could see everything through the big front window and his profile half turned. The stranger's face, tired and wet from the rain. A conversation too quiet to hear, but loud enough in posture. He didn't move, didn't knock, didn't interrupt. Part of him said, "Go in there. Check she's okay. Say something." But another part, the older, quieter part, knew this wasn't his to fix. So he watched Anna's eyes flash, her arms fold, her shoulders rise and fall like a wave she was trying to stand against. He watched the man step closer, then stop, saw Anna hold the door open, saw him hesitate, then walk out. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't look out to see if anyone had seen her. But Mark had. She stayed at the doorway for a moment, hand still on the frame, then slowly she closed it. Mark stood in the rain another minute longer, then turned and went into the bakery. Ben was halfway through a blueberry muffin. "Everything okay?" the boy asked. Mark nodded, but it was slower than usual. "Yeah, everything's fine." But it wasn't. Not really. Back in the bookstore, the warmth had returned. The lights glowed as they had before, the tree still leaned, the radio still hummed. But when Mark walked in, the room felt different, like someone had opened a window he couldn't find and let in air from a place he didn't recognize. Anna was shelving a book that didn't belong in that section. Her hands moved like she wasn't thinking. "Hey," Mark said gently. She looked up, startled, then offered a small, apologetic smile. "Hey." Ben ran in behind Mark, holding out half a muffin. "Save you some." Mark took it, smiled, ruffled his hair. Anna moved to the back counter, poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink. Mark didn't ask. She didn't explain. They went through the motions of the afternoon like nothing had happened. But something had. That night, after Ben was asleep and the store was closed, Mark stood by the front window, looking out at the sidewalk where the stranger had stood. Rain still pooled in the cracks of the pavement. Anna stepped beside him, arms crossed, eyes unfocused. "I wasn't expecting him," she said. Mark didn't answer right away. "Did you want him to come?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not really, but part of me wondered if he ever would." "And now?" she exhaled. "I don't know." He nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't mean to see," he said, but I did." She didn't look at him, just said, "I figured." More silence. He reached up and adjusted the star at the top of the tree. It tilted a little, but stayed. "I don't want to be anyone's replacement," Mark said, almost a whisper. "You're not." He turned to her. She finally met his eyes. "I'm still figuring things out," she said. "I know. And I can't promise anything." "I'm not asking for promises," he said. She hesitated, then, almost imperceptibly, stepped closer. "I just don't want to lose what this is." Mark looked at her, really looked, and replied simply, "Then don't." They stood like that, not touching, not fixing, not naming what they were. But neither of them walked away. It was just past 5 when Anna stopped at the corner across from the bookstore. She hadn't planned to come by. She was supposed to be meeting a friend for dinner, packing her last box, moving forward, whatever that meant. But somehow her feet brought her here. The street was quiet. Snow fell slow, like feathers shaken from an old quilt. The bookstore windows glowed with soft amber light. It looked warm in there, safe, a different season entirely. She didn't cross the street. Instead, she stood still and watched. Through the window, she could see them. Mark sat behind the counter, hunched over something with deep concentration. Ben was beside him, standing on a wooden stool, hands moving quickly, paper, scissors, maybe glue. A school project, she guessed. Maybe snowflakes, maybe a holiday card. It didn't matter. Mark leaned in to help, not rushed, not impatient, just present. Ben said something. Mark laughed, just enough to tilt his head back and soften the creases near his eyes. Anna felt it in her chest, that sound, that moment. Then Mark reached for something behind the counter, probably tape, and Ben leaned in too far, nearly slipping off the stool. In one motion, Mark caught him by the waist, steady and instinctive. He didn't scold, just placed him back down gently like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Ben grinned, unfazed, kept working. Mark brushed a strand of hair from his own forehead and went back to folding whatever was in front of them. Anna watched the whole thing as if she weren't real, as if the glass wasn't cold beneath her fingers, as if she weren't standing on the outside of something she wasn't sure she had the right to enter. She shifted slightly, one hand resting on the curve of her stomach. The baby moved, just a soft flutter, but it was enough. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just watched. The kind of watching that sees everything without needing to explain any of it. No one else was on the street. No one else saw what she saw, a man who had every reason to close himself off, and hadn't. A child who had learned that safety didn't mean perfection, and a bookstore that somehow became a home. Mark stood up then, stretching, and glanced toward the window. He didn't see her, not really. His eyes passed over the street and moved on. But even so, he looked peaceful, not like someone waiting, just someone who stayed. Anna let her hand fall from her coat. She stepped back from the window. Not much, just one step. That was all she needed. She turned and walked down the sidewalk, boots pressing softly into fresh snow. She didn't knock. She didn't go inside, not yet. But as she walked away, something in her posture had shifted. Not urgency, not certainty, but something quieter, more permanent. Decision. Daniel was waiting on the steps outside her building. No duffel bag this time, just his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets and a look that was part apology, part unfinished sentence. Anna saw him as she rounded the corner, her breath caught, not from fear, not even from anger, just habit. Some part of her still braced whenever he showed up, but she didn't slow her step. He stood when he saw her, tried to smile. It didn't land. "Hi," he said. "Daniel, can we talk?" "We are." He hesitated. "Can I come in?" She looked at the door behind him, then shook her head. "I don't think that would help either of us." He nodded slowly, eyes cast downward. "I know I didn't come back the right way or at the right time. I know I don't get to ask for much." Anna waited. The cold air sat heavy between them. I needed to say something," he added. "To try." She crossed her arms, not in defense, just to keep her warmth close. "I've spent a long time blaming myself," he said, "for freezing up, for running, for not knowing how to be the man you needed." Her expression didn't shift. "And maybe I still don't know how," he admitted, "but I want to try. I want to be a father. I want to be in her life if you'll let me." The word her still made something flicker in her chest. She studied him, really studied him. Daniel looked thinner, tired, maybe sorry, but also lost, like a man still looking for a door that had already cleared. Anna's voice, when it came, was quiet but sure. "I believe that you mean that. I do." He looked up. "But I also believe," she continued, "that sometimes love is not enough, and sometimes timing breaks things that don't come back the same." He swallowed. "You walked away when I was most afraid, when I needed a partner, not a visitor. I was scared." "I know," she said gently, "and I forgave you for that. But I also learned something." "What's that?" "That I'm allowed to stop hoping someone will become what I needed them to be." Daniel blinked. His hands twitched slightly at his sides, then stilled. "I'm not angry anymore," Anna said, "and I don't hate you. But I'm not coming back to that version of us." He nodded slowly. There were no protests, no big speech, just the way his shoulders fell a little, like something inside had settled even if it hadn't been satisfied. "Can I still be part of her life?" he asked. "I think that depends," she said, "on what kind of man you choose to be next. Not for me, for her." He nodded again. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't exile either. "I'll do better," he said. Anna managed a small smile, gentle, real. "I hope so." She turned to go, then paused. "And Daniel?" "Yeah? Next time you want to be in her life, don't show up wet and apologizing. Show up steady and on time." He gave the smallest laugh, just enough to admit she was right. She didn't look back again. The elevator was slow, as always. As she waited, she felt the baby move again. Stronger this time. She placed her hand over the spot and whispered, "I think we're ready." Back in her apartment, she stood at the window. Across the street, the bookstore lights were still on, warm, unchanged, waiting not for her, but for whatever came next. And this time, she didn't feel like she had to ask permission to walk toward it. The bookstore closed early, not because of bad weather or low sales, just because tonight was different. Inside, strings of paper lanterns looped across the ceiling. A handful of friends from Ben's class had already come and gone, leaving behind half-eaten cookies and colored drawings tacked to the walls. Now it was quiet again, just the three of them. Mark sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping cider from a mug that said, "World's okayest dad." Ben leaned over a pile of wrapping paper, picking at the last unopened box. Anna sat nearby, watching them both with a quiet, steady smile. "Last one," Ben said, holding up the small box. "Can I open it now?" Anna nodded. "That one's from me." He tore the paper with practiced skill, like someone who understood anticipation was half the fun. Inside was a plain cardboard box, and inside that, a tiny snow globe. Ben lifted it out carefully. It fit in the palm of his hand. Inside the glass, a crooked little house, painted red, with soft glitter snow swirling around its roof. For a second he just stared, then looked up. "It's like the ornament," Anna smiled. "It's the same house." Ben shook it gently. The snow sparkled. "There's something else," she added, nodding toward the base. He turned it over. A switch. A small light inside flickered on, glowing warm through the windows of the tiny house. Mark leaned in, his voice low. "That's beautiful." Anna shrugged lightly. "It's not expensive. I just saw it and it felt right." Ben held it to his chest. "I love it." He got up and walked to the front window, placing the snow globe beside the leaning Christmas tree, like it belonged there. Then came back and plopped between them, leaning against Anna's side without a word. She didn't flinch this time. She just rested her hand lightly on his back. Mark watched them, one hand on his mug, the other unconsciously smoothing a crease in the rug. Ben spoke without looking up. "I think the house is us." Anna tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "It's not big or perfect, but it's warm, and there's light." She looked at Mark. He looked back. The boy didn't know it, but he just named something they all had felt without saying. "Can we leave it here all year?" Ben asked. Mark nodded. "Yeah, bud, it can stay." The snow globe sat in the window, flickering like a small lighthouse. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the air stayed still and safe. No candles, no big song, no party favors, just a boy who finally felt home wasn't something you moved into. It was something that slowly built around you, one moment at a time. The bookstore was quiet again. Ben had fallen asleep upstairs, curled beneath a blanket with one sock missing. Mark had carried him up without waking him. Now only faint footsteps creaked from above as the old woods settled into stillness. Downstairs, paper plates were stacked beside half-drunk juice boxes. A few balloons clung to the ceiling like they didn't want to leave. Anna stood at the counter, slowly peeling tape off a handmade happy birthday banner. Mark emerged from the back room with a trash bag in one hand, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "Did we do okay?" he asked. Anna smiled, gently folding the banner. "I think we did more than okay." Mark dropped a handful of cups into the trash. "Ben said it was the best birthday ever. He also ate 4 cookies and tried to feed the snow globe a grape," she replied. "Still counts," Mark said, smiling. They moved slowly, picking up crumbs and forgotten napkins. No rush, no silence to fill, just the quiet rhythm of people who no longer felt the need to pretend. When most of the mess was cleared, Mark sat down on the floor, back against the nearest bookshelf. Anna joined him a few moments later, tucking her legs beneath her. "I don't know what I expected," she said after a long pause, "coming back here, letting myself stay." "You thought you'd leave again?" "Yeah," she admitted. "I thought I'd run like I always do." Mark didn't say anything, just waited. Anna glanced toward the front window. The snow globe still sat on the sill, glowing softly in the dark. The tiny house inside looked even warmer now. "I used to think trust was something people gave you," she said, "like a key, and if you lost it, that was it." Mark nodded slowly. "I used to think the same. But now," she paused, "I think it's more like a door you build from both sides." He looked at her. "And if one person stops building, then you wait," she said, "or you knock." A long beat passed. Mark spoke next. "There's a part of me that still wonders if I'm enough." Anna turned toward him. "You are. You don't even know what that means for me." "I don't need to," she said simply. "I've seen how you show up. That's enough for me." His eyes softened. "And you?" She breathed out slowly. "I'm tired of thinking I have to fix everything before I'm worthy of being chosen." Mark leaned his head back against the shelf, closing his eyes. They sat like that, not touching, not rushing, just present. After a while, Anna asked, "Do you miss her?" He didn't open his eyes. "Sometimes, not her exactly, just the version of life I thought I was building." Anna nodded. "Me too." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "But I like this one better." She didn't smile right away, but when she did, it was quiet and full of meaning. She leaned forward slightly, pulling something from her coat pocket, a small folded piece of paper. "I've been writing names," she said. Mark blinked. "Names?" "For the baby." He took the paper gently, opened it. 3 names, all girl names, each with a note beside it. One meant light, one meant peace, one meant home. "I thought you might want to help me choose." Mark looked up, surprised. That's a big ask. I know. But yeah, I do. He folded the paper again and handed it back. Anna tucked it away. Outside, the wind had settled. Inside, the balloons drifted slowly toward the floor. I'm not ready to say what this is, she said. You don't have to. But I don't want to pretend it's nothing. Me neither. They sat a while longer, letting the bookstore return to silence. Then Anna stood, stretching. I should go, but I'll come back in the morning. Mark stood too, brushing off his jeans. You don't have to knock. She smiled again, half playful, half honest. Maybe I will anyway, just so you'll open the door. And then she left, coat wrapped around her, hand resting on her belly, walking into the soft cold with a heart that no longer felt like it had to armor itself. The hospital room was dim, not dark, not cold, just quiet, like the world outside had been asked to wait. A single light above the bed cast a gentle circle around Anna's face. Her forehead glistened with sweat. Her hands gripped the sheets, not in panic but in concentration. Mark sat beside her, one hand in hers, the other resting lightly on her knee. His eyes never left her face, no monitors beeped, no machines whirred. The midwife moved calmly, almost invisibly in the corner. Everything was low and slow. Outside the window, dawn was trying its best to break through a curtain of snow. Anna's breathing was steady now, measured, raw. She didn't cry out, she didn't curse, she simply endured. Mark whispered once, "You're doing good." She didn't answer, just nodded, eyes closed, jaw clenched. Then a shift, a pause, a sound that wasn't pain, and then the room filled with the smallest cry. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The midwife moved forward, gentle and efficient. She wrapped the baby, checked what needed checking, then turned to Anna and Mark with a smile that didn't need words. "A girl," she said softly. Anna exhaled like she hadn't in weeks. Her whole body slumped, not in exhaustion, but release. Mark was already standing. The midwife handed him the baby, first still slippery, still pink, still blinking against the sudden light. Mark looked down at the bundle in his arms. For a long moment he didn't speak. Anna watched him, watched his throat tighten, watched his eyes soften in that exact way she'd seen the first time he watched Ben hang a paper snowflake. He walked slowly to her side, placed the baby gently in Anna's arms, and then sat, close enough their knees touched. The baby blinked, then yawned. Anna whispered, "Hi." The child didn't answer, but something settled. Mark reached forward, adjusting the edge of the blanket so it wouldn't slip. Anna looked up at him. "You okay?" she asked, voice hoarse. He smiled. "Yeah, just needed a minute." She leaned back slightly, letting the baby rest against her chest. Her heartbeat calmed, her breath slowed. Outside, the snowfall thickened, but the light was beginning to win. Mark stayed close, still not saying much. After a while he asked, "Have you decided?" Anna glanced down at the tiny face, then nodded. "I think her name is Elise." Mark let the word settle. He repeated it once, quietly. "Elise." Anna looked at him. "You okay with that?" He smiled. "I was the moment you said it." They sat together for a long while, not as a couple, not with labels, just as two people who had shown up for each other, for a child, for something that didn't need defining to be real. Elise stirred slightly, her mouth searching. Anna shifted, adjusted, offered what her body had prepared. Mark looked away, respectful but not distant. And somewhere between a snow-draped morning and a quiet hospital room, something began. Not a love story, but a family. Built not on promises, but presence. It was early spring when the ground finally softened. Still cold in the mornings, still snow in the corners of the park, but enough green had returned to make it official. Things were growing again. Outside the bookstore, the sidewalk was damp and the sun came through weak but persistent, the kind of sun that made no promises, only gestures. Mark stood beside a small hole he'd dug near the curb. Ben was kneeling next to it, hands dirty, holding the roots of a young tree wrapped in burlap, a dogwood, small now, delicate, but full of buds waiting to open. Anna sat nearby on a bench, Elise in her arms, swaddled tight and asleep against her chest. No cars passed. No one else was around. It was just them. Mark looked at Anna. "Ready?" She nodded. "Let's do it." Ben lowered the little tree into the hole with a kind of reverence that surprised even him. His usual energy was quiet today, focused, like he knew this mattered. Mark helped him adjust it, then gently packed the soil back around the base. Anna stood, walking over slowly. She passed Elise into Mark's arms, then knelt down and brushed dirt from the plaque they'd prepared together a few nights ago. No grand inscription, just one word: Grace. She sat back on her heels, brushing her hands against her jeans. Mark looked down at the baby sleeping in his arms. "She okay?" Anna smiled. "Better than all of us." Ben stood, brushing his hands off proudly. "Can we water it now?" Mark handed him a small tin watering can, already filled. Ben poured carefully, like the tree might complain if splashed. Anna stepped back beside Mark. Their shoulders touched. He looked at her. "Why, Grace?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because she came when I had nothing left to offer, and she didn't ask for more than that." He nodded. "That tree might not make it," he said. "City's rough. Dogs, winter, salt trucks. But it might," she replied simply. They stood like that for a while. Elise stirred slightly, a soft sigh leaving her lips as she shifted in Mark's arms. Ben pressed a small painted stone at the base of the tree, a gift from school art class, a heart in red and blue. It wobbled slightly in the soil but held its place. Anna exhaled slowly, watching the wind catch in the dogwood's thin branches. They didn't bend so much as sway, like they were listening. "When she's older," she said, "I want her to know we planted something for her." "She will," Mark replied. "It's right outside the place she started." Anna looked at him, then down at Elise, then back at the storefront book-lined windows, the soft lamp still glowing behind the glass. "I used to think healing meant going back," she said, "back to who I was, what I had." He didn't interrupt. "But now, I think it's more like learning to live forward, even if it's not what you imagined." He shifted Elise gently, holding her a little closer. "She'll never know a version of us without her," he said. Anna smiled. "Exactly." Ben ran up to them then, full of words and bright eyes. "Can we get hot chocolate now? Real hot chocolate, not the powder kind." Mark looked at Anna. She laughed. "Absolutely." They started walking. Mark held Elise close. Anna reached down and took Ben's hand. The four of them walked slowly back toward the bookstore. The light over the door was already on, a quiet welcome. Behind them, the little tree swayed gently in the wind, roots settling deeper beneath the earth, its name catching a sliver of sunlight just as the clouds parted. Grace.